Well, hello, and welcome back to yet another edition of Music Basics. Here I'm Mr. Peters. I teach music at Conneaut Valley Middle School, and so I'm excited to be able to share with you today the basics on key signatures. So how do we understand a key signature? If you've watched some of the other videos, you might be saying, man, does this guy always wear that same sweatshirt? Well, it happens that this is the fourth video that I've made in sequence here today. And so, no, I don't always wear the same clothes. I assure you, I wash them regularly. Well, I don't wash them. My wife does our laundry, and I really appreciate her. Little shout out to her, wonderful woman that she is. Okay, enough of all of that. Back into the basics of music, understanding key signatures. Well, I just finished making a video on how a major scale is built. And it follows that sequence of whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Well, any note that we start on, this major scale has to follow that sequence. So today I'm going to be using my Sibelius program to help demonstrate and help you understand how key signatures are utilized in music, and more importantly, or more basically, how we can easily identify what a major key signature is. So sometimes it seems kind of so ambiguous out there. As a young musician, I remember looking at these key signatures, and I don't know, it was like magic. Where they came from was just some kind of a magic formula that somebody threw on the page and named it. Well, actually, it isn't magic. It is really based on some elements. I showed you in the last video how to create a C major scale, and it starts and ends on a C. Well, in music, C major scales have no sharps and no flats because the sequence of notes works out perfectly with the series of whole steps and half steps when you start and end on a C. Well, the next major scale that we would build would be a G major scale. A G major scale starts and ends on a G and has an F sharp. And the reason why it has an F sharp in it is because we have to have that sequence of whole steps and half steps, right? So G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp. We have to raise the seventh degree of the scale in order to get the sound that we are familiar with in a G major scale. So a G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp has to have that F sharp in it in order to make it sound like that major scale that we're so accustomed to. So when we do this, when we play this major scale, we're going to hear the sequence of notes sounds normal. So that would be our G major scale. Now, here's the interesting thing. The sharp in the key signature is always what we call the leading tone. It's always going to impact the seventh scale degree, or in this case, that F sharp leading back to home bass G. It's a leading tone. And so it becomes that last half step before home bass. Well, home bass is the identifier in the key signature. So in this case, it's a G major scale, right? The F sharp, the last sharp in the key signature, will always lead to home bass. Well, if we know and understand that, then all of a sudden our key signatures can be much more readily or quickly identified. So in this case, I'm going to wipe out all those notes. And now let's just take another look at our key signatures, right? So what if we had two sharps in there? Oh, wait a minute, look at there. I had all kinds of stuff happen. Let's get rid of this thing. Yeah, I want to get rid of that. Huh? Don't say that. Please select a note. Oh, okay. Never mind. So I'm just going to focus right over here on the left side. I don't know why that popped in there. Oh, because my cursor wasn't at the beginning. Silly. So here we have our two sharps. the last sharp in the sequence, if you remember, is going to be the leading tone, always. Well, that's kind of confusing for some of you, especially as you're just learning music and you're just starting into this. What that means is that's going to be leading to home bass. So if that's a C sharp, it's a leading tone to a D. This is D major. So if I were to put my first note on that scale, or on the staff rather, this is where my scale would begin or end. So you could run a D on the bottom, a low D, up to a high D. And the C sharp, last sharp in the key signature, will always identify leading tone, leads to a D. C sharp leads to a D. Well, let's get rid of that. Let's come back here and say, I'll see if I can do this so it doesn't impact all of the other notes here on the staff. So now let's change to the next key signature. Right? I want to add it. Now let's 3 sharps. I'll add the 3 sharps here. And now we have F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, always coming in the same order. Remember, when there's only 1 sharp, it was the key of G. When there's 2 sharps and the last sharp was a C, that's the key of D. Well, now we have 3 sharps. The last sharp in this sequence is a G. That G sharp leads to G sharp, leading to the next note in sequence, G, A. G sharp leads to an A. This is the key signature for A major. So if I were to start and end this scale, it would have to start and end on an A. So 3 sharps, A major, because the last sharp in the sequence is a leading tone and it leads to a G, or excuse me, an A. G sharp leads to an A. So the last sharp is always going to lead to, well, leading tones. Well, if there's 4 sharps, it's E major, because the last sharp in the sequence is a D, it leads to an E. Now you're going to notice that there's a pattern forming here. F sharp, C sharp, then they simply move up 1 step each, G sharp, D sharp. Our next sharp in the sequence would follow this. F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp. After that would start then an A sharp. Well, instead of putting it up here on a ledger line, they actually drop the A sharp down and keep it on the staff. So they never use any ledger lines and key signatures. So now the sequence, F sharp, C sharp, next to G sharp, D sharp. We would move up to an A sharp, but instead they drop it all the way down to an A sharp. Now, if A sharp is the last sharp in the sequence, remember the leading tone, you go up 1 step to a B. This is B major. Now, we won't worry about 6 sharps and 7 sharps. That gets kind of crazy. We don't see that very often in the beginning music. As you advance in music, you'll see all these different key signatures. But for the beginner, the early musician, even if you get into 5 sharps, that's quite a bit. But if you're a guitarist, you'll get into B, the key of B. And sometimes we want to capo that and shift that around, make it a little easier to play. But in this case here, we have the leading tone. The last sharp is the leading tone to home bass. We're going to practice this in just a moment. So let's come over here and let's say we have, well, it's not going to help us out very much because we're going to see this. So let me stop the screen share and I'm going to then switch this around a little bit and ask you to identify what this key signature is. So let me bring you back to my screen. I've switched that up and let's see if you can tell me what key signature, what major key signature are we working with? If you remember leading tone, that should be, your answer should be we are in the key of G. Well, it helps if I actually put that at the beginning of the staff. That is a G. Leading tone, F sharp, leads to a G. And so you can practice that on your own by asking, what are these different notes? Let's see if I can get this one. I'll erase that as well. And now we'll do one more. What if I did this key signature here? And hopefully I did that fast enough. What is this key signature now? This one was a G. Now what is this key signature? Looking at the sharps. By the way, if you're a bass clef reader, let's do this one in bass clef. Here's a F sharp. That would be a G. That's home bass, G major. Here we are. We have three sharps. First sharp, F sharp, C sharp, G sharp. Well, if G sharp is the leading tone, it leads to an A. So this is the key of A. Here we have, the key of A in treble clef. Okay, so that's all of our sharps. Now what about the flats? Flats actually become easier to identify. Let's get rid of all of this stuff that I have on the page here. And we'll get rid of this, and we'll get rid of that, and we'll get rid of this. And now we're going to come back over here, get rid of the sharps. And oops, it's telling me you can't wait. You can't do that. I know it. It's like having the boss right here with us. So we know that C major, no sharps, no flats. Let's talk about the flats now in our major keys. The flats work really easy to identify them as well. Where the last sharp is a leading tone, the flats work a little differently. First, we just want to memorize that in F major, we have one flat. That is going to be that fourth scale degree. It needed to be lowered in order to get, again, the whole steps and half steps. So F to a G, F, G, whole step, G, A, whole step, whole, half, to have to add that B flat in there. So there's where the flat comes from in F major. F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F. That's our F major scale. Has one flat. We just have to memorize that. No sharps, no flats. We memorize it's C major. One flat, we're in F major. Now, after that, it gets very easy because what if we have two flats? Well, again, the flats are always going to come in the same sequence. B flat, E flat. E flat will always be the second in the sequence of flats in our key signature. If you look to the next to the last flat, it will always tell you your major key signature. So next to the last flat here, the last flat is an E flat in the sequence. The next to the last is a B flat. So B flat happens to be our home bass in this key signature. That's home bass. That is a B flat major key signature. There it is in bass clef. So anytime that you see those notes or the key signature in flats, they become much easier to identify. You look to the next to the last flat. So here's the B flat major. Here's E flat major next to the last flat. B flat, E flat, A flat. This is E flat major. And A flat major, there's four flats. It seems like, oh my gosh, it's kind of confusing. But again, if you just look to the series of flats left to right, you're reading them left to right, B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat. The next to the last flat is an A flat. Hence, you can identify that as home bass. It's an A flat major scale. It starts and ends on an A flat, and it has these four flats in it. Notice how flats will follow the same sequence as well. I love the flat key signature when we're looking at it. When there's two flats, B flat, E flat. If you go up to six flats, however many flats you add, notice how they add in pairs. B flat, E flat, then next two, A flat and D flat, and the next two, G flat and C flat. They'll always follow that same sequence. What key signature is this? I don't know, too many key signatures. My brain is melting down. Don't panic. Remember, you look to the next to the last flat in the sequence and it tells you your major key signature. Last flat is a C flat, next to the last flat, and that key signature is right here. That's a G flat. That tells you that this key signature is a G flat. That's how it works. Pretty slick. Don't be overwhelmed by that. Kind of go back and watch the video again. You can then start to identify what all of these key signatures would look like. What is this home bass? Well, this one happens to be next to the last flat, G flat. And there it is. Well, what is this flat? Let's practice a couple. Let's get rid of that. Well, what happens if I, in this measure, were to say, let's add a couple. Let's see what we can do here. Oops. Okay, let's come over here then. And let's say, about this one. And say, oops, not time signatures. Time signatures that will be a different lesson altogether, won't it? And what about this key signature? Let's do another flat. Let's go here. Okay, so now we have a whole series of different key signatures. Well, the first one, 2 flats. Oh, let's come back here because this one I already have 2 flats in the beginning. Let's do with that. All right, so that gives us a whole bunch of practice key signatures. We'll do this, and that's how we'll end our time together. Whole bunch of them, right? So let's get rid of this. So the very first one, 2 flats, B flat, E flat. Remember, look to the next to the last flat. It tells you the key signature. There it is. This one is the key of B flat. And so I can enter my B flat in there, and that is home bass, B flat. There you have it. Well, what about this one right in the middle of a measure? And so here we have 6 flats. Oh my gosh, my brain is melting. My brain, don't melt down. Here we go. Next to the last flat is what? A G flat. This is home bass, G flat. That's G flat major key signature. Oh boy. 5 flats, 5 flats. Too much to memorize? Nope. Look to the same thing, always the same in flats, next to the last flat. Major key signature here is a D flat. Whew. All right, no problem. What does a D flat look like in bass clef? Well, so next to the last flat, it's right there. D flat major. Here is 3 sharps. How did we do sharps again? Last sharp is a leading tone. So this is a G sharp, G sharp, G sharp. If we go up 1/2 step from the G sharp, it takes us to home bass, G sharp to A. That's the key of A major. Here we are, 2 sharps. The last sharp in the sequence is leading tone. This leads to, that's right, a D. So here we are in the key of D major. Trying to take away the mystery of key signatures for you. A D major scale will start and end on a D. Last one then that we're going to do, next to the last flat, E flat, and that's going to be our home bass for this key signature. And now we have the key of E flat major, and there it is in bass clef as well. So identifying key signatures. I certainly hope that helps you understand. That's a lightning lesson. Go back and watch it a couple of times until you really start to let that settle in. That's where they come from. And then you don't have to be overwhelmed anymore. Now you can amaze your music teacher. You'll walk into class and say, oh, I can tell you what major key that is. Well, they may say, yeah, but if you listen closely, this is minor. Oh, that's another lesson altogether. Don't worry, we'll cover that in a future lesson. Major key signatures. Now you know how to identify them, and I hope it isn't as overwhelming. Learning all this stuff about music is only the building blocks. Truly, the enjoyment comes out of playing and singing and making music. So go out and make some music today and enjoy yourselves. Share that gift with somebody else. Be a blessing to them as you share your gift of music with other people. Continue to love it, continue to grow and understand it, but it's all there just to help you become a better musician so you can be a blessing to others. So I hope that this lesson has been helpful for you in understanding how to go about identifying key signatures in your music. Hey, have a great day, and I hope it's been a help to you. If so, hit like, and if you really enjoyed this series and you want to share it with others, you can go and click me, click this series as a favorites for you, and you can then explore all of the other elements of basic building blocks of music. See you until next time. Have a great day.